Hello again, and thank you for taking time out of your day, and welcome to another episode of Words of Life. I pray that life is well with you and your loved ones, and thank you so much for taking time to open up God's Word and focusing in on what His will for us in His Word. What I want us to focus in on today is something that I don't know if you are struggling with or have struggled with, but I think this is an area that at least our culture deems as a weakness, and that is asking for help. Sometimes it is referred to as being humble or expressing humility. And I think that many of us fall into that category as seeing that being humble or expressing humility as showing a sign of weakness, but in reality, it's a sign of true strength. And I just want us to consider a couple of passages that I think or believe that demonstrate true strength, and that is coming before the Lord, before God, and saying, Look, you are what I need. You are the only one that can help me. And we need to submit ourselves to His authority. And so let's just look at a couple of passages, and I hope that these will be beneficial for us to reflect on. I think these are pretty well known passages, probably to most of us, and we need to hopefully keep these in our mind. So the first passage comes from Mark chapter 9, setting up the uh, scene, the context. The disciples had been sent out on a commission, and um, after they had been sent, there is this one individual, this man, who presented to the disciples in order and hopes to be healed. And in Mark chapter 9, this came after the transfiguration. We are seeing this man with a troubled child who has been experiencing seizures, and there appears to be some sort of spirit, evil spirit, that is controlling them. And then the disciples were not able to help the individual. And let's just read beginning in verse 14 of chapter 9. When they came back to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. Immediately, when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed, began running up to greet him. And he asked them, What are you discussing with them? One of the crowd answered him, Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit which makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth, and grinds his teeth and stiffens out. I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it. And he answered them and said, O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me. They brought the boy to him. When he saw him, immediately the spirit threw him into a convulsion, and falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. He asked his father, How long has this been happening to him? And he said, From childhood. It has often thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, If you can, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately the boy's father cried out and said to him, I do believe, help my unbelief. When Jesus saw that a crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him, and do not enter him again." After crying out and throwing him into a terrible convulsion, it came out, and the boy became so much like a corpse that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and raised him up, and he got up. When he came into the house, the disciples began questioning him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He said, "This cannot come out but anything but prayer." So, just briefly on this passage, and then we'll move on to the other passage. Here, what sticks out is what I want to mention, the boy's father and his exclamation of, "I do believe, help my unbelief." What I've been told by this passage, heard from another teacher, that in this cry out, that he is essentially at his wit's end. I think we can relate when we have exhausted all of our resources, we have nowhere to turn to, and often we turn to other things except for the one true person that can help us in the direst of circumstances, and that is God. And I think we can relate to this individual in the aspect of, "Lord, help me." Nothing else can, but Lord, help me. Help me in what appears to be an impossible situation. And I think that we believe that there is so much that we can learn from this man, that when we feel hopeless, helpless, is often when we turn to God. But let us not get to that point. Let us be willing to turn to God before it comes to that point. Another passage I want us to briefly look at and consider is a passage from Luke 18. And the sign of strength that I want us to consider is coming from the one man that humbles himself and says, "I need your help, O Lord." Just like the guy, or the father, I should say, back in Mark chapter 9, but here in Luke chapter 18, beginning in verse 9. "And he also told this parable to some people who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and viewed others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and was praying this to himself: 'God, I thank you that I am not like other people, swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes of all that I get.' But the tax collector, standing some distance away, was unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, 'God, be merciful to me, the sinner.' I tell you, this man went to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted." I like it how this man, this tax collector, realizes that he was completely unworthy of God's assistance, and he was asking for mercy, just like the father, asking for mercy, asking for help. And we are completely undeserving, but God is merciful. God is gracious. And I pray that we can realize that if we submit ourselves humbly before Him, if we realize whom God is, then we can receive mercy. We can receive grace. We got to not acknowledge Him in the way that He desires for us to acknowledge. So I hope and pray that these are some passages that we can reflect on, that we need to humbly come before Him, and that it is true strength when we submit humbly before the Lord. So thank you as always for spending time in God's Word. Just want to continue to encourage you to do so. Reach out to us because we have the desire to speak to you about your spiritual concerns. That is what our desire is. So may God bless you this day. Until next time, may the Lord be with you. Take care.